My brother-in-law destroyed my career and made my coworkers homeless just to prove he was better. So I exposed him and watched him lose everything. 2 years later, he just applied to work at my new job, and it's my choice whether or not to hire him. Don't tell this story often because honestly it still makes my hands shake, and not from the PTSD. When I came back from Iraq with one leg, the doctors said I was lucky. The first person to visit me after was my brother-in-law Richard, and I'll never forget what he said. Well, at least you got a free retirement out of it. I stared at where my leg used to be and wondered if this was what my life meant now. 5 years later, and I still wake up at 3 a.m. checking for my rifle. Still hit the deck when cars backfire. But you know what hurts worse than losing a limb? Watching your family look at you like you're broken merchandise. Richard owned 3 restaurants and never missed a chance to remind everyone. Every Christmas, every birthday, every damn barbecue, he'd show up in whatever new Mercedes he'd bought that month while I was still learning to walk without falling. My therapist at the VA kept saying I needed purpose. Purpose. Like I hadn't had purpose before. Like leading men through hell wasn't purpose enough. But she was right about one thing. I needed something to fight for again. So I started cooking. Sounds stupid, right? Big tough soldier playing chef. But when you've eaten nothing but MREs for 18 months, you learn to worship flavor. I saved every penny of my disability checks, watched every cooking show, read every book the library had, and I bought a beat-up food truck that looked like it had survived its own war. My buddy Carlos came to help. Lost his left arm in Kandahar but could still fix an engine better than anyone. When Richard saw it, he actually laughed and said, "That piece of poop is going to ruin you." But here's the thing about veterans. We're used to being underestimated. Within 6 months, I had 8 guys working shifts. My best guys were Tommy, who got seizures from a TBI but made the best tacos you've ever tasted, and Mike, whose hands shook from nerve damage but could flip eggs like poetry. We weren't just serving food, we were serving hope, giving guys like us a reason to get up, a place where nobody thanked us for our service with that look of pity. But for some reason, Richard hated it. At my niece's graduation, he pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget. Giving handouts to broken soldiers won't fix them. Maybe if they were stronger, they wouldn't need charity from a food truck. I wanted to kill him. Instead, I walked away. I knew what I needed to do. There was an annual city food competition, and guess whose restaurant was hosting? I entered that night. My crew thought I'd lost it competing against real chefs, but they didn't get it. This wasn't about winning. This was about proving we weren't broken. We practiced for weeks. Tommy's mother had sent him recipes before she died, and we perfected every one. Mike's Korean grandmother had taught him dumplings, and even with shaking hands, they were perfect. When our truck rolled, Richard's face was beautiful. The crowd came in waves. By afternoon, we'd served over 300 plates. When they announced People's Choice winner, Richard was already on stage expecting his name. Then they said my name. His face went from red to purple to white. $5,000 prize and this ridiculous golden spatula. Richard had to hand it to me, and I swear his hands shook worse than Mike's. I took the mic and looked him in the eye. I want to thank Richard Castellano for inspiring us to work harder. When people tell you you're broken, you have 2 choices. Believe them or prove them wrong. He had to smile, but when he shook my hand, he whispered, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The next week was beautiful. Lines around the block. For once, something good was happening. Then the inspection started. 3 and 5 days. Our permits got lost twice. There were noise complaints from nowhere, but we kept going because that's what we do. Then Carlos texted me that cops were impounding the truck and Tommy was seizing from stress. Everything we'd built was burning. I sat there thinking, maybe we were too broken to build anything good. Then I remembered our oath. We don't leave anyone behind. I drove to the truck expecting disaster, but found something else. Richard was there, signing for the truck. He came over to me and said, "The cops considered the truck a health problem. Don't worry, I handled everything. They plan to crush it later today." I told him he was insane. He said, "No, I'm just better than you." I grabbed my phone and started recording. Evidence. Always get evidence. Richard's smirk widened as he watched me fumble with my prosthetic, trying to steady myself on the uneven pavement. Behind him, 2 officers were already hooking chains to my truck. Tommy sat on the curb, his whole body trembling, while Mike held a paper towel to his nose where he'd hit the ground during Tommy's seizure. "You really thought you could compete with me?" Richard stepped closer, his cologne making my stomach turn. A bunch of broken soldiers playing restaurant? This was always going to end one way. The tow truck engine roared to life. My truck, our truck, lifted off the ground like it weighed nothing. Carlos stood by the hydraulics, his one good arm clenched into a fist. I could see him calculating whether he could disable the tow truck before they hauled everything away. "Don't," I called to him. "Not worth it." Richard checked his watch, a Rolex that probably cost more than my truck. "Smart man. At least you know when you're struck." That's when I saw him. Marcus, the kid I'd fired 3 months ago for showing up hammered during the lunch rush. He was sitting in Richard's Mercedes counting a stack of bills. Our eyes met through the windshield and he looked away fast, shoving the money into his jacket. Everything clicked. The sudden health complaints, the anonymous tips about code violations, the inspector who seemed to know exactly where to look for problems that didn't exist. Marcus knew our operation inside out. He knew where we stored supplies, our cleaning schedules, which permits we'd filed. "How much did you pay him?" I asked Richard. "Pay who?" But his smile gave it away. He wanted me to know. Wanted me to understand how thoroughly he'd struck me. The truck disappeared around the corner. 5 years of savings. 6 months of 18-hour days. Gone. Tommy's seizures were getting worse. I could hear Mike trying to keep him calm. These men had followed me through hell once. Now I'd led them into another disaster. "Here's what's going to happen," Richard said, pulling out his phone. "The health department will find serious violations. Your permits will be revoked. The fines alone will bankrupt you. Unless..." He let it hang there. I knew this game. In Iraq, we called it winning hearts and minds. Make them need you, then make them beg. Unless what? You publicly apologize. Admit your food was substandard, that you put people at risk. I'll make the problems disappear. Behind him, Tommy vomited on the sidewalk. The seizures always left him like this, confused and sick. Mike was trying to clean him up with napkins from his pocket, his hands shaking so bad he kept dropping them. "I need time to think," I said. "You have 24 hours. After that, the health department files criminal charges." He walked to his Mercedes where Marcus slouched lower in the passenger seat. As they drove away, I saw our golden spatula in the back window. The bastard had taken our trophy too. Carlos helped me get Tommy into my van. Mike climbed in beside him, still dabbing at his bloody nose. Nobody spoke during the drive to the VA hospital. What was there to say? We'd lost everything in less than an hour. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. The health department department launched a full investigation. Every day brought new accusations, improper temperature controls, contaminated surfaces, expired licenses, all lies, but proving that took money I didn't have. My savings evaporated fast. Lawyer fees, storage costs for our impounded equipment, medical bills for Tommy's increasing seizures. I sold my good prosthetic, the one that didn't hurt after 8 hours, sold my truck, sold everything except my pride, and Richard knew that was next. Carlos crashed on my couch the first week. By the second week, he'd lost his apartment, couldn't make rent without the food truck income. He never complained, just showed up every morning to help me sort through paperwork, trying to find something to fight back with. Mike's grandmother took him in, but I could see the shame eating at him. He'd been sending her money from his food truck earnings. Now he was back to being her burden. His hands shook worse every day. Tommy's mom would have been devastated. He'd been doing so well, down to maybe 1 seizure a month. Now it was 3, 4 times a week. The stress was unaliving him, and the VA doctors just upped his meds and sent him home. I spent my days at the library, researching health codes, filing appeals, trying to understand how Marcus's lies had started this avalanche. My nights I spent staring at my phone, reading Richard's text over and over. Time's running out. Just say the word, and this all goes away. 3 weeks in, I found it. Buried in the health department's report was a receipt. Marcus had provided it as evidence of expired meat purchases, except the receipt was dated 2 weeks after I'd fired him. He couldn't have known about that order because he wasn't working for us anymore. I called my lawyer, excited for the first time in weeks. She listened, then sighed. It's good, but not enough. We'd need to prove Richard paid him, prove the whole thing was fabricated. That takes depositions, subpoenas, court time, months at minimum. Can you afford that? I looked at Carlos sleeping on my couch, his good arm hanging off the edge, at the pile of Tommy's medical bills, at the foreclosure notice I'd been hiding under my keyboard. No, I couldn't afford it. That night, Carlos found me sitting in the dark, the golden spatula in my lap. I'd snuck into Richard's restaurant and taken it back. Stupid, but I needed something to hold on to. You're going to take his deal, Carlos said. It wasn't a question. I can't let you guys end up on the street because of my pride. It's not about pride. He sat beside me, his phantom arm probably aching like my phantom leg. It's about them winning. Again, they already won. No, they won when they sent us to war. They won when they brought us back broken. They won when they thanked us for our service and then forgot we existed. This is just Richard being Richard. I thought about that all night. About Tommy's mom's recipes going to waste. About Mike's grandmother proud of him for the first time in years. About all the other veterans who'd started coming by. Not for charity, but for dignity. The next morning, Richard called. Time's up. What's it going to be? I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He'd orchestrated this perfectly. Made me watch my brothers suffer. Turned my need to protect them into a weapon against me. The same leadership instincts that kept my squad alive in Iraq would now force me to surrender. I need to see the paperwork first, I said. Proof you'll actually drop everything. Smart. My office, 1 hour. I hung up and looked at Carlos, Tommy, and Mike. They'd all shown up, like they knew today was the day. Tommy's face was still bruised from his last fall. Mike's hands trembled as he tried to drink coffee. Carlos just looked tired, older than his 35 years. Whatever you decide, Tommy said, his words slightly slurred from the medication. We're with you. I nodded, unable to speak. These men had followed me through actual hell. They deserved better than watching me grovel to save them. Richard's office smelled like leather and arrogance. He had the papers ready, probably drafted weeks ago. All I had to do was sign, admit publicly that our food was substandard, that we'd put people at risk, that Richard had saved the city from our incompetence. Where's the guarantee you'll drop the investigation? I asked. He slid another paper across the desk. Official health department letterhead, already signed by the inspector. All charges dropped, all fines waived, conditional on my public statement. And my men? They won't face any consequences? They're not important enough to prosecute. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Muscle memory from signing too many casualty reports. Richard leaned back in his chair, savoring his victory. You know what the funny thing is? He said. You actually made decent food, but decent doesn't matter when you're playing in my world. I thought about Marcus, somewhere counting Richard's money, about the inspector who'd been bought, about the system that let people like Richard destroy lives for sport. Then I thought about the oath we'd taken, the promise that meant more than any piece of paper. I signed my name and watched Richard's smile grow. He'd won by making me choose between my pride and my brothers, but he'd forgotten something important about soldiers. We adapt. We overcome. We find another way to fight. Pleasure doing business, Richard said, already reaching for his phone to arrange the press conference where I'd humiliate myself. I stood to leave, my prosthetic clicking against his marble floor. At the door, I turned back. You know what we used to say in Iraq? The enemy always gets a vote. You voted. Now it's my turn. His smile faltered slightly. Good. Let him wonder what that meant. Let him lose a little sleep, because this wasn't over. I'd signed his paper. I'd take his deal. I'd even say his words. But Richard had made one crucial mistake. He'd left my men with nothing left to lose. And there's nothing more dangerous than soldiers who've already survived the worst thing imaginable. I walked out of his office and into the sunlight where my brothers were waiting by the van. They didn't ask what I'd decided. They could see it in my face. The same look I'd had before every mission. We weren't done fighting. We were just changing tactics. The press conference was scheduled for noon the next day. Richard wanted maximum exposure. All the local food bloggers and restaurant critics watching me eat crow in front of his flagship location. I spent the morning practicing my lines in the bathroom mirror while Carlos made coffee with the last of our grounds. Our food safety standards were inadequate, I said to my reflection. The words tasted like ash. I take full responsibility for putting the community at risk. Carlos appeared in the doorway. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I adjusted my tie, the only one I owned. Tommy had another seizure last night. The hospital bills alone will destroy him. We picked up Mike and Tommy on the way. Tommy's left eye was swollen shut from where he'd hit the nightstand during his seizure. Mike's grandmother had packed us sandwiches, her hands steadier than her grandson's as she'd handed them through the car window. The parking lot outside Richard's restaurant was packed. He'd really pulled out all the stops. Local news vans, food bloggers with their cameras, even some city council members. As we walked up, I saw Marcus skulking near the dumpsters, trying to stay invisible. He saw me looking and ducked behind a delivery truck. Richard met us at the entrance, all smiles for the cameras. So glad you could make it, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Then quieter, just for me. Stick to the script or the deal's off. The podium was set up right in front of his restaurant's gold-lettered sign. I stood there looking at the crowd, my good leg starting to ache from standing too long. Richard introduced me like I was some kind of cautionary tale, talking about the unfortunate situation with my food truck. I gripped the podium and leaned into the microphone. The words I'd practiced started coming out. I want to apologize to the community. Our food safety standards were inadequate. We put people at risk through our negligence. Behind the cameras, I could see my guys. Carlos stood ramrod straight, his jaw clenched so tight I worried he'd crack a tooth. Mike had his shaking hands shoved deep in his pockets. Tommy swayed slightly, probably still dizzy from his medication. I take full responsibility, I continued. Mr. Castellano's concerns were justified, and I'm grateful the health department intervened before anyone was hurt. Richard nodded approvingly from the side. He'd won, made me humiliate myself and my men in front of everyone who mattered in this city's food scene. But as I spoke, I noticed something. A woman in the back was recording on her phone, but she wasn't focused on me. She was filming Richard. I recognized her. Maria Gonzalez, whose son David had just come back from Afghanistan. David had been one of our regular customers, said our truck was the only place that felt like home. Maria's face was hard as stone as she watched Richard gloat. In closing, I said, the final words sticking in my throat, I want to thank Mr. Castellano for his vigilance in maintaining the highest standards for our community. Applause scattered through the crowd, mostly from Richard's employees. I stepped back from the podium, my part done. Richard took my place, ready to bask in his victory. That's when Maria Gonzalez spoke up. Mr. Castellano, will you be hiring any of these veterans now that their truck is gone? Richard's smile flickered. Well, that's not really relevant to today's. It's just that you seem so concerned about food safety, Maria continued. Surely you'd want to help these men find proper employment in real restaurants. I'll certainly consider any qualified applicants, Richard said smoothly. My son says they're the best cooks in the city, Maria pressed. Will you interview them? Other voices joined in. Parents of veterans, customers who'd eaten at our truck, people who'd seen what we were trying to build. Richard's PR moment was slipping away from him. We'll see, he said, trying to wrap things up. Thank you all for coming. But Maria wasn't done. Mr. Castellano, my son has the same condition as Tommy, seizures from his service. Will your restaurants accommodate employees with disabilities? Richard's face was getting red. We comply with all applicable laws. That's not what I asked. The crowd was murmuring now. Richard cut the press conference short, ushering everyone away from the podium. As he passed me, he hissed, "You set this up. I didn't know she'd be here," I said honestly. Doesn't matter. Deal's done. Stay away from my restaurants and we'll have no more problems. We drove back to my apartment in silence. The humiliation sat heavy in the van, mixing with the smell of Tommy's medication and Mike's grandmother's sandwiches that none of us could eat. Carlos finally spoke when we pulled into the parking lot. That woman, Maria, she's organizing something. Doesn't matter, I said. It's over. But Carlos was already on his phone, scrolling through social media. Look at this. The video of Richard dodging Maria's questions was already spreading. The comments were brutal. People asking why a restaurant owner who claimed to care about the community wouldn't hire veterans. Others sharing stories about eating at our truck, how it had been the best meal they'd had in months. It doesn't change anything, I said. We still have no truck, no permits, no money. Maybe not, Mike said quietly. His grandmother had been teaching him to use social media to promote the food truck. Now he showed us his phone, but people are angry. The next few days were strange. Richard had won, but it didn't feel like it. The video kept spreading. Food bloggers who'd been at the press conference started writing pieces about veteran unemployment. One reporter dug into how many health complaints had been filed against food trucks in the past year, noting the suspicious spike in the last month. I tried to ignore it all. I had bigger problems. The VA had scheduled another surgery consultation for my leg. The constant standing at the food truck had aggravated old damage. Carlos was couch surfing between friends, too proud to admit he was essentially homeless. Tommy's doctor wanted to adjust his medications again, which meant more tests, more bills. Then Richard made his next move. I was at the library filling out job applications when my phone rang. Unknown number. Is this the owner of Squared Away Food Truck? The voice was professional, cold. Former owner, I said. This is the city health department. We've received additional complaints about food served from your truck. Several people are claiming food poisoning from meals served in the weeks before your closure. My blood went cold. That's impossible. We never had a single complaint while operating. Nevertheless, we need to investigate. Can you provide customer records, supplier invoices, employee health certificates? All of that was in the truck that had been impounded and crushed. I don't have access to those records anymore. That's unfortunate. Without documentation to dispute these claims, we may need to pursue civil penalties. Have a good day. I sat there staring at my phone. Richard wasn't done with us. The public humiliation hadn't been enough. He wanted to bury us completely. Carlos was furious when I told him, he can't do this. We already signed his papers, made his deal. Men like Richard don't make deals, I said. They take what they want until there's nothing left to take. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phantom leg screamed with pain that no medication could touch. I lay there thinking about my men. Carlos sleeping on someone's floor. Tommy having seizures in his childhood bedroom. Mike's hands shaking as he filled out job applications for work he couldn't physically do. We'd survived war. We'd survived coming home broken. But Richard was going to finish what the IED started. The next morning, Maria Gonzalez called. I heard about the new complaints. My son David wants to help. There's nothing to help with, I said. It's over. No, it's not. David has been talking to other veterans who ate at your truck. None of them got sick. We can get statements. Statements won't matter without documentation, and I can't afford a lawyer to fight this. Then we'll find another way. She paused. You served our children. Now let us serve you. I wanted to believe her, but I'd learned not to count on civilians understanding our world. They meant well, but meaning well didn't pay bills or stop men like Richard. The next few weeks were a blur of bureaucracy and degradation. The health department sent official notices. The fine started at $5,000 and climbed from there. I applied for jobs at every restaurant in town, but word had gotten out. Nobody wanted to hire the guy who'd publicly admitted to serving unsafe food. Carlos got work doing day labor, his one arm limiting him to holding signs at construction sites. Mike's grandmother convinced a friend to let him wash dishes at a diner, but his shaking hands meant broken plates and lost wages. Tommy couldn't work at all. The stress had triggered the worst seizure cluster of his life. I sold everything I had left, my medals, my dress uniform, the flag from my retirement ceremony. Each piece felt like selling off chunks of my soul, but the bill bills kept coming. Medical for Tommy, fines from the city, lawyer fees for fighting the new complaints. Then one night, Carlos showed up at my door with a split lip and black eye. What happened? Nothing. Just some hammered at the labor pickup site. But I knew Carlos better than that. He was a fighter, trained like me. Some hammered couldn't have done that damage unless Carlos let him. You threw the fight, I said. For money. He looked away. $50 to take a dive. I need to eat. This was what Richard had reduced us to. Warriors taking punches for pocket change. I wanted to rage, to break something, but I was too tired. The fight had gone out of me the day I signed those papers. There's something else, Carlos said. I saw Marcus today, buying rounds at a bar, flashing cash, bragging about some big payday. Good for him. He was hammered, really hammered. Started talking about Richard, about the food truck. Said Richard promised him more money if he testified about the food poisoning. I sat up straighter. He said that out loud? To anyone who'd listen, bartender finally cut him off and called him a cab. This was it, the first real mistake in Richard's plan. Marcus was a weak link, and alcohol made him weaker, but knowing it and proving it were different things. We need someone to record him, I said. Get him talking again. With what money? We can't even afford a beer to get into the bar. He was right. We were too broke to even investigate our own destruction. I lay back down, the brief spark of hope already fading. The next day brought more bad news. The city was pursuing criminal charges now. Food safety violations that could mean jail time. My lawyer, working pro bono out of pity, said the case was thin, but would cost thousands to defend properly. Take a plea deal, she advised. Community service, probation. It's better than prison. Prison. I'd survived Fallujah and Kandahar, and now I might go to prison for serving tacos. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. That afternoon, I was at the VA for my surgery consultation when I ran into David Gonzalez. Maria's son looked like I felt. Hollow eyes, careful movements, the 1,000-yard stare that marked us all. Heard about the criminal charges, he said. That's messed up. I shrugged. What was there to say? My mom's not giving up, he continued. She's got half the veteran community fired up about this. They're planning something. Tell her thank you, but it's too late. Richard won. David studied me with eyes that had seen too much. You know what the difference is between us and civilians? They think winning and losing are endpoints. We know they're just moments in a longer fight. After he left, I sat in the waiting room thinking about his words. In Iraq, we'd lost battles but kept fighting. Lost friends but kept moving. Maybe that's what this was. Not an ending, but a moment. The surgeon eventually called me in. More bad news. The damage to my residual limb was worse than expected. I needed surgery soon, or risk losing more of my leg. Of course, without insurance, the surgery would cost more than I'd made in a year with the food truck. I laughed. Actually laughed. The nurse looked concerned. I'm fine, I told her, just appreciating the joke. Walking out of the VA, I saw a familiar car in the parking lot. Richard's Mercedes, parked in a handicapped spot without a placard. He was there for a photo op, presenting a check to the VA Foundation. $10,000, enough to cover maybe 3 of Tommy's emergency room visits. He saw me and smirked. Couldn't help himself. Had to twist the knife one more time. How's the job search going? He called out. I stopped, turned. About as well as your parking skills. His face darkened. Watch yourself. You're one phone call away from a jail cell, and you're one tow truck away from learning to walk. Funny how life works. I shouldn't have said it, but I was tired of rolling over, tired of taking punches. If I was going down, I'd go down swinging. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you're clever? I own this city. I own the health department, the permits office, half the city council. You're nothing. A broken soldier playing with toys he didn't understand. Maybe, I said, but at least I earned what I had. His face went purple. For a second, I thought he might actually take a swing. Then he remembered where we were, the cameras, the check presentation. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts, he said, walking away. That night, I called my guys together. We met at Mike's grandmother's house because she was the only one who still had food to share. She'd made Korean soup, the kind that warmed you from the inside out. I'm going to take the plea deal, I announced. Probation is better than prison. No, Tommy's voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. We don't leave anyone behind, remember? This is different. I'm not asking you to. You're not asking, Carlos interrupted. We're telling. We're not letting you go down alone. Mike's grandmother said something in Korean. Mike translated, his voice shaky but determined. She says a man who feeds the hungry is blessed. A man who punishes the generous is cursed. Richard will learn this. I wanted to argue, but looking at their faces, I knew it was pointless. These men had followed me through actual hell. They weren't abandoning me now. So what do we do? I asked. We fight, Carlos said simply. Just like always. We find a way. Over the next few days, something strange happened. People started showing up at my apartment. Veterans I'd never met. Family members of guys who'd eaten at our truck. They brought food, job leads, offers of help. Maria Gonzalez came by with a petition signed by 300 people demanding the city drop the charges. This isn't just about you anymore, she explained. It's about all of us. Every veteran who's been told they're broken. Every family that's watched their loved ones struggle. Richard picked the wrong fight, but petitions didn't pay lawyers or stop criminal charges. I still needed evidence. Needed proof of Richard's corruption. And that proof was locked in Marcus's alcohol-soaked brain. Then Mike's grandmother had an idea. She knew the owner of the bar where Marcus had been drinking. Korean community ties ran deep. Maybe he'd be willing to help. What could he do? I asked. Mike translated her response. Security cameras. They record sound if someone's loud enough, and Marcus is very loud when hammered. It was thin, but it was something. Carlos and I went to the bar that night. The owner, Mr. Park, remembered Marcus well. Very annoying customer, he said. Always talking, bothering other people. Bad for business. Do you still have security footage from last week? Mr. Park hesitated. Maybe. But why should I help? I don't want trouble with Mr. Castellano. I understood. Richard had reach. Getting involved meant risk. Because your nephew came home from Afghanistan last year, Mike's grandmother had told us to say. Because you know what it means to serve. Mr. Park's expression changed. He disappeared into a back office, returning with a thumb drive. I don't know what's on this, he said. I didn't look. Can't help what customers say when they're hammered. We thanked him and left quickly. Back at my apartment, we crowded around my ancient laptop. The video was grainy, the sound worse, but there was Marcus, hammered, loud, and talking. Richard's a genius, his slurred voice came through the speakers. Paid me $5,000 just to say I saw rats in their truck. Easiest money ever. Carlos grabbed my shoulder. That's it. That's what we needed. But I was already thinking ahead. One hammered confession wouldn't be enough. Richard would claim Marcus was lying, making things up for attention. We needed more. Can you clean up the audio? I asked Mike. His hands shook as he he took the laptop. I'll try. While Mike worked on the audio, I made a decision. If we were going to fight, we needed to fight smart. Richard had shown me his weakness. He couldn't help but gloat, couldn't resist twisting the knife. That ego would be his downfall. I called my lawyer. What would happen if I violated the terms of our agreement? He could reinstate all charges, pursue the full penalties. Why? Just wondering. But I wasn't wondering. I was planning. Richard thought he'd struck us down so far we couldn't get back up. He was wrong. We'd been knocked down before, in Iraq, coming home, every day since. The difference was, this time we knew our enemy, knew his tactics, and unlike in war, he couldn't call in air support. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I shaved, put on my best clothes, and went job hunting. Not at restaurants, but at Richard's suppliers, the companies that delivered his produce, his meat, his dairy. At the third stop, I found what I was looking for. The loading dock manager was a veteran, Vietnam era. He recognized the look in my eyes. Rough times? He asked. You could say that. We talked for a while, about war, about coming home, about how some fights never really end. Then he mentioned something interesting. Castellano's been pushing hard for lower prices lately, making threats about switching suppliers, acting like he's got cash flow problems. Cash flow problems. Richard with his Mercedes and Rolex, struggling for money? It didn't add up. Unless, how much does he owe you guys? The manager looked around, then pulled up something on his computer. Between you and me, he's 60 days behind. Almost $100,000. We're about to cut him off. There it was. Richard's real weakness. He wasn't rich. He was leveraged. The restaurants, the cars, the image, all built on credit and reputation. No wonder he'd come after us so hard. We weren't just competition. We were a threat to his image. Proof that success didn't require his kind of cruelty. I thanked the manager and left with a new understanding. Richard wasn't some untouchable king. He was a desperate man juggling too many balls, and we'd almost made him drop them all. That night, Maria Gonzalez called with more news. The petition had grown to over 1,000 signatures. Local news wanted to do a story about veteran-owned businesses being targeted. The city council was feeling pressure. We're not going away, she said. Neither should you. I looked at the thumb drive with Marcus's confession, at the information about Richard's debts, at my men, broken but not struck. Maybe David Gonzalez was right. Maybe winning and losing really were just moments in a longer fight. All right, I said. Let's see what happens next. The criminal charges were still hanging over my head. Richard still had his connections. We were still broke, still struggling. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something besides despair. Hope. It wasn't much, but in my experience, a little hope could go a long way. We'd started with less in Iraq and survived. We could survive this too. The next morning brought a new complication. Richard had accelerated his timeline. My lawyer called to say the criminal trial had been fast-tracked. 2 weeks instead of 2 months. Barely enough time to prepare a defense, let alone gather evidence. He's pushing hard, she said. Someone wants this over quickly. I knew why. The longer this dragged out, the more attention it got. Richard needed me silenced before his house of cards collapsed. But pushing hard meant making mistakes. And Richard was about to make his biggest one yet. The next morning, Mike's grandmother called before sunrise. Her voice was urgent, speaking rapid Korean that I couldn't understand. Mike took the phone, his face going pale as he listened. Marcus is at the hospital, he translated. Alcohol poisoning. He's been asking for you. I threw on clothes and drove to the county hospital, my prosthetic catching on the clutch pedal. The emergency room smelled like bleach and desperation. Marcus was in bed 12, hooked to an IV, looking smaller than I remembered. His eyes widened when he saw me. I'm sorry, he croaked. I'm so sorry. Save it, I said, pulling out my phone. Just tell me the truth. He started crying, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. Between gasps, the story spilled out. Richard had found him at a bar, bought him drinks, listened to him complain about being fired. Then came the offer. $5,000 to lie about seeing rats. Another $5 to testify about food poisoning. I needed the money, Marcus whimpered. My mom's sick. I couldn't find work. I recorded everything. His confession, his description of meeting Richard, the exact amounts paid. When he finished, I had 20 minutes of evidence. Will you testify to this officially? I asked. Marcus nodded, then grabbed the bedpan and threw up. I left him there, already calling my lawyer. She answered on the third ring. It's 6 in the morning. Marcus just confessed. On video, he'll testify. Silence. Then, bring me everything. Now. I drove straight to her office, Carlos meeting me in the parking lot. He'd cleaned up the bar footage overnight, isolating Marcus's drunken confession. Combined with the hospital recording, we finally had ammunition. My lawyer watched both videos twice, taking notes. This changes things, but Richard will have expensive lawyers. They'll attack Marcus's credibility, claim he's lying for attention or revenge. So what do? We need corroboration. Other evidence that supports his story. Bank records showing the payments. Witnesses who saw them together. Carlos and I spent the next 3 days investigating. We found the bartender who'd served Richard and Marcus. Got security footage from the bar showing them together. Even tracked down Marcus's bank records showing 2 $5,000 cash deposits. Meanwhile, Maria Gonzalez had mobilized an army. Veterans and their families protested outside City Hall. Local news picked up the story. The hashtag #FeedOurHeroes started trending. Richard's restaurants began getting 1-star reviews by the hundreds. Richard tried to control the narrative. He gave interviews calling me a disgruntled competitor spreading lies. But the more he talked, the more desperate he sounded. His PR team quit after the third disastrous interview. Then Carlos found the smoking firearm. Richard's personal assistant, a young woman named Nicole, had been at the bar that night. She'd taken photos of Richard meeting with Marcus, thinking it was funny to catch her boss slumming it. The photos showed Richard handing Marcus an envelope. Nicole was terrified of losing her job, but Carlos's girlfriend knew her from yoga class. After hours of convincing, she agreed to provide the photos if we kept her name out of it. My lawyer took everything to the district attorney. The next day, Richard was arrested for witness tampering and fraud. The image of him being led away in handcuffs made the evening news. His restaurants closed within a week as suppliers demanded immediate payment. The health department dropped all charges against me. The inspector who'd signed the false reports quietly resigned. The city offered to expedite new permits for my food truck whenever I was ready to start again, but I wasn't ready. The damage was done. Tommy was in the hospital again, his seizures requiring round-the-clock monitoring. Carlos had found steady work at an auto shop, but was sleeping in the back room. Mike's hands had gotten so bad he couldn't even hold a spatula. I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the golden spatula. We'd won, technically. Richard was facing prison. His empire had crumbled. crumbled, but what had we really gained? My men were still broken, still struggling, still forgotten by everyone except when we made convenient headlines. That's when Margaret Chen knocked on my door. She was a venture capitalist, she said. Veteran herself, Air Force. She'd been following our story. I want to invest, she said simply. Not charity, business, a chain of food trucks, all veteran operated, proper benefits, health insurance, mental health support. I stared at her. Why? Because Richard was wrong about one thing. You weren't playing in his world. You were building your own. She left me with a business proposal. Professional, detailed, real. Carlos read it that night, then Mike, then Tommy from his hospital bed. For the first time in months, I saw hope in their eyes. We doing this? Carlos asked. I thought about everything we'd lost, everything we'd survived, everything we still had to fight for. Yeah, I said. We're doing this. The next 6 months were brutal. Business plans, investor meetings, permits, and licenses. But this time, we weren't alone. Maria Gonzalez connected us with a non-profit that provided small business training. David introduced us to other veterans looking for work. Even Mr. Park offered to be a supplier, giving us the family discount. We launched with 3 trucks. I ran one, Carlos another, and a new guy named Nicholas ran the third. Nick had lost both legs in Syria, but could work a grill like magic. Tommy came back part-time when his seizures stabilized, training new cooks. Mike became our social media manager, his shaking hands steady enough to type. Opening day, the lines stretched around the block, not because we were a news story, but because we made good food. Richard's former customers became our regulars. His old suppliers gave us the deals he'd demanded through threats. Richard got 18 months in minimum security. I heard he worked in the kitchen, which seemed like justice of a sort. His restaurants became a chain pharmacy, then a chain gym, then sat empty. The golden spatula sat in my office, a reminder that winning meant more than destroying your enemy.